coolest thing about using the JK chassis for this rig is the fact that there is so much aftermarket support for that chassis. I mean, yeah, I could have either built a chassis or, you know, built a full custom suspension for this rig, but it's not what it needs. It just needs a really good performing dual purpose suspension system, because that's what this rig is going to be used for. So the beauty of having the JK chassis underneath the rig is I can simply, you know, pull a complete functioning suspension system out of a box and just bolt it up to the chassis, and I know it's going to work. The only thing that I may have to change in the long run is I may have to play around with some of the spring rates, just because the weight of my Willys Wagon is not going to be the same as the weight of 2007, 2008 Jeep JK. And that's okay, you know, just a couple tweaks here and there, and it should be good to go. But that's the plan, you know, just basically pull some suspension out, put it underneath the rig, and turn it into a hardcore off-road rig. And we're here right now. Let's build a wagon. The body is gone. I took it off the frame, sent it down to Jeremy Winter's shop. He's posted a bunch of pictures on social media of all the work he's doing to it, basically all the filler work. The plan here is simple. We're gonna get the rolling chassis as complete as possible, and then I'm gonna run down there, pick up the body, and we're just gonna drop it onto the frame and make it so you can actually drive it over before he lays down the final coat of paint. Well, there's a bunch of work I gotta do to this frame. There's just a few brackets and tabs and things that I gotta chop off. And this isn't rocket appliances or anything, it's just a whole bunch of grinding, cutting, more grinding, until all the items that I don't need on this frame are gone. Then I'm gonna hit it with a good coat of satin black spray paint. It's like a brand new frame. I've already shown you the Cummins R2.8. I needed it in the frame rail to finish out all the sheet metal on the body, but what I really want to do is basically take you through the entire process of getting the R2.8 underneath the hood of pretty much any rig, and all the little tips and tricks that you need to know in order to get one of these running in your project. I think it really deserves the time because honestly, I think it's probably one of the neatest crate engine packages out there. Small 4-cylinder diesel, and it's also probably one of the most complete packages. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at what comes with the engine. When I say complete, I mean complete. This crate engine comes with everything. Wiring harness, ECU, fuel filter, water separator, a throttle pedal. It even comes with the quick connect fuel line fittings that you're gonna need to plumb the fuel system. Like a glove. Next decision you're gonna have to make is what transmission to install. Now, I opted for the Tremec 4050 from Silver Sport Transmission. It's a 5-speed manual gearbox. It's gonna be perfect for this rig, and to adapt it to the R2.8, I'm using a Quick Draw brand bell housing adapter and a center force clutch assembly. I first met Chad from Quick Draw years ago when I actually bought a 6BT off of him for another project. And now he is the go-to guy for these adapter bell housings for the R2.8 and a bunch of other diesel engines. This package is perfect, reusing the stock flywheel that comes with the R2.8 that they modify to fit the clutch. Now the bolts that hold the flywheel on from the factory are torque to yield. That means one-time use. It's only 15 bucks for new bolts at the Cummins dealer, and it's good insurance for your project to install the new bolts. With the drivetrain bolted together for good, I can now swing it into the frame. Now the transfer case is clocked and in position. I already know that's right, but there's two things I need to deal with right now. Number one is a skid plate for the engine. The R2.8 has a plastic oil pan, and that is there to prevent a lot of sound from transmitting out from underneath the engine up into the passenger compartment. It's not a big deal, you just got to plan ahead for that. So I'm going to build a skid plate for the bottom of the engine. At the same time, I'm going to build a skid plate that's going to come back and protect the transfer case when we're on the rocks. The whole point of this skid plate is basically twofold. I'll actually weld it up to this cross member here. That way it will help stiffen up the transmission mount. And then back here, I'm just gonna bolt it onto this plate that I welded in. I always make the holes for my skid plate oversized. That way if the skid plate ever gets bent, it's easy to put the bolt through. And I'm just gonna secure it with some of these really cheap carriage bolts. So I'll just come in from the back side, push through, and then I'll put a nut on the front I can easily get to with my hand even when the body's back on here. But that way the head of the bolt doesn't get damaged if it ever gets picked up by a rock. This part of the skid plate is only 1/8 inch plate, which is fine because it's being supported at either end with thicker steel. And I'll weld up this seam on the inside just to give it a little bit extra strength. The engine comes with what's called after treatment. It's a DOC, so diesel oxidation catalyst, and then it's your job to get the exhaust to the back of your rig. I'm using a bunch of MagnaFlow 2.5 inch stainless tubing as well as one of their mufflers, and all I'm gonna do is basically cut myself my own little flange for the back of that on the plasma cutter, and then I'll come up, run along the frame rail, and dump it out the back. Next, fuel system. I have a great spot for the fuel separator and filter assembly on the side of the frame. And if you remember, I'm using a stock Jeep TJ tank inside a Savvy aluminum skid plate. But I have to modify the original fuel module to work with the R2.8. The stock electric fuel pump for the TJ, it's got to go and then replaced with just a single rubber line. The R2.8 has a lift pump that pulls fuel from the fuel tank. I then removed the internals from one of the rollover vents in the tank, and now this is the return line for the system. Then all I have to do is run a feed line to the filter, and then from the filter to the engine. And the return line runs along the top of the fuel rail with a mixture of rubber and steel line. Very happy to get the big pieces of the drivetrain into this frame rail. Cummins 2.8, our adapter, our transmission, our transfer case, all the skid plates, fuel lines, the exhaust is now done. That's just stuff that's way easier to take care of when the body is up and out of the way. There's still a few major things that I have to take care of before this engine is obviously ready to run. I got to deal with the cooling package, so a radiator and an intercooler, but I want to get the body back before I start messing around with that. I did go ahead and install the clutch, master, and slave cylinder onto the bell housing, and it's just basically a stock TJ unit. This is not finished for our rolling chassis quite yet. I want to go ahead and completely build out all the axles and install the suspension before I drop the body back over it. But as for today, this is one step closer to getting my 53 Willys wagon back on the road. We'll see you next time. I'm going to enjoy this beverage.